Sebastian, welcome to the show.
Thanks, buddy. Great to be here.
We had a little bit of technical difficulties there because, when you're dealing with technology, it just sort of happens, but I appreciate your patience and we were able to get things in order.
Good.
So, Sebastian, I want to have you on the show because, I'm making a little shift here. I'm making a little transition here. I'm trying to broaden my audience a little bit. And I think that, I'm a public adjuster. Okay, that's what I do. I'm going to introduce you in a little bit right now, but I want to tell you a little bit about myself first because I'm a public adjuster, and mainly the audience that I've typically had for the last 4 or 5 years on my YouTube show has been other public adjusters. Do you know what a public adjuster is?
Yeah, you go adjust things publicly.
Exactly. Just as I thought. No is the answer. Basically, I'm an insurance adjuster, but I work for the homeowner. So if you were to have water damage or a hurricane and you want to file a claim with your insurance company and you're having an issue with your insurance company, you hire me to basically defend you and get you more money on your insurance claim. And then I, in turn, get a percentage off of what we're able to settle on your insurance claim.
Yeah.
The problem is that most public adjusters don't know how to run a business, don't know how to market themselves, don't know how to promote themselves, don't know anything about systems operations, don't know anything about entrepreneurship. But they know everything there is to know about insurance claims. But the issue is they're not going to work any claims if they can't find a claim. And one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on and why we're broadening our audience is because I'm trying to now build the complete public adjuster. It's not, and I'm just trying to build a complete entrepreneur, right? It's not just about what you do and the thing that you do, in this case, insurance claims. It's about properly marketing yourself, have good training in sales and good sales skills, know how to run a business, systems, operations, and just know how to actually be a good leader and have the proper mindset. So that's why we've got Sebastian Rusk. He's a podcasting expert, a digital storyteller, and quite frankly, not only is he a podcast host, but he's an author, he's a speaker, he's a digital marketing expert, and he's all about really helping people make sure that they can get their podcasts off the ground with proper digital marketing and ultimately market their business better. So that's your introduction, Sebastian. Welcome again to the show. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks, buddy. Great to be here.
So, Sebastian, tell me a little bit about yourself. Tell me a little bit about what you do and about this whole podcasting thing.
Yeah, so I'm a professional speaker, comedian, and podcaster. I started an agency about 10 years ago, helping folks go from idea to iTunes in 90 days or less, launching a podcast, and really haven't looked back since. It's been quite the wild ride, and I get the opportunity to help people radically change their life and their business because they decided to start a podcast.
Okay. So when I invited you on, I asked you one question. You remember what that question was? Because you laughed your ass off when I asked you the question. The question was, Sebastian, don't we have enough podcasts already?
I mean, my immediate response is, don't we have enough books? People are going to stop writing books? Probably not.
We don't have enough books. We'll never have enough books. I love books. Let's read. I love reading. So no, to answer that question.
So same thing applies to podcasts.
Why is that?
Because people are constantly starting and stopping things. No one follows through with things. Some people do, some people don't. Some people start the book. Some people don't finish the book. Some people get in the middle of the book. Some people are always writing the book. Same scenario with podcasts. They start, they stop. The people that find the most success with it are the ones that start it and stick with it. And that's what I'm deeply passionate about. And that's what we enable people to be able to do, is not just launch a podcast, but get out there and do something with it. Interview people you want to do business with, create content because of the podcast. And then, the whole mystery of who do you get to become as a podcaster.
What is it about podcasts that interests you so much though? Like, what is it about the podcast? Because you've got a book, you've got obviously a podcast, you've got a hell of a website, and you've got a lot of things going, and it all goes back to a podcast. What is it about the podcast that separates it from just, say, writing a book or just digital marketing in general? Like, what is it about the podcast?
I think they all really play together when it comes to associating your brand and positioning yourself as the go-to source for what you do. And that's what I've been aggressively working towards doing for the past 15 years, specifically the past 10 years with podcasting, is being able to position myself where when someone thinks about starting a podcast, I am the obvious choice. Why? Well, the guy's written a book. He speaks all over the world on the topic. He's got an agency. He helps people start them. He hosts 2 different shows. He obviously is the guy that we need in order to help us make a podcast a reality.
What's the most important thing about having a successful podcast?
Consistency. Yeah, consistency. And charging your mouse.
People didn't know about that. We've got it plugged in. For the viewing audience, it's now plugged in.
For those of you who didn't know, Vince had a dead mouse when we started, okay? It's better than having a dead live mouse. Could you imagine that?
I was going to say, that could be a lot. That could actually be a lot worse.
That's a public adjusting story right there.
Potentially, and that would smell really, really bad. You're right, though. Consistency is key. We've had well, I do want to ask you another question. Yes, consistency is key. I totally agree. We've had the YouTube show for now 5 years, haven't missed a single content Wednesday, and we keep going, rocking and rolling. And you know what's
I
funny?
feel like my buddy Mike Miranda, who's in my BNI chapter, turned me on to you a couple of years ago because he's been talking. Another one of those talkers. Maybe I should start a podcast, but he thinks he's too cool for school. And every time there's a new storm that comes along, I'm so busy. I got to go, storm chase. And I think that he introduced me to you. Like, it just showed me your Instagram profile. Maybe because you've been doing this for a minute now.
I didn't even know that you knew who I was. I'm the one that reached out to you. So I appreciate that.
Well,
All right,
now that I'm seeing your brand, it may be you. I may be way off. I just text him, so we'll find out in a minute here.
Okay, got it. Consistency is totally key. I do have a question though. Is my YouTube show considered a podcast? And the reason why I'm asking that is like,
no,
it's not,
no,
right? But does
no,
a podcast?
No.
But does a podcast when I think podcast, I think interviews, and I think more than one person, not more than one host, just more than one person. Am I right or wrong about that?
Kind of. So podcast, let's just start by definition. If you Googled what is a podcast, Google would tell you it is an audio piece of content uploaded to the internets to be consumed auditorily. That means you listen to a podcast. This whole notion around video podcasts and all this muddying of the waters that have happened when people take podcasting or any piece of content for that fact and marry it into podcasting. YouTube is a whole different ballgame. People go to YouTube to be entertained and to get their questions answered. People listen to podcasts to be entertained, to be educated, and to consume audio content. Now, some would argue, but Sebastian, I like to watch things because that's how I learn. Well, that's cute and everything, but before video was so easily accessible, you were probably pretty willing to listen to something on here. So I stand my ground. The video podcasts do not exist. There is no room in the world for them. If you have content on YouTube, you do in fact have a show on YouTube. Now, whether or not you take the audio from that show on YouTube and repurpose it into a audio podcast is entirely up to you. At that point, you would then have a YouTube show and a podcast, but there's never a mention. It's like an oxymoron almost to like video podcast.
I agree with you. I mean, I'm not going to lie. We do use the content that we post on YouTube, and then we do post it like on a Spotify platform. But I agree with you. I do think that it's definitely much more of an audio format. And by the way, you're showing your age by saying Googled. Nobody Googles anymore, Sebastian. Nobody does that.
What do? They chat GPT?
Of course, man. Get with it. Come on. I thought you were part of Dan Martell's coaching program.
I did. I changed my browser to chat GPT. Yeah, absolutely.
So 10 years ago, that's a long time ago. Just because, 10 years ago, we're looking at 2015. What was the state of the podcast industry in 2015? Because it's definitely not what it is now.
Well, podcasting's been around since 2000 or 2002 was when it was first conceptualized. It was created, the name was created because it was a cast to be put on an iPod. So they came up with the word podcast because that's exactly where the cast would happen, was on the actual iPod. Became pretty popular initially, faded out. Then in like 2009, the true crime serial podcast became very popular. And in fact, that entire case got overturned because of the podcast. So when these things started to happen, where content was being created and an existing like criminal conviction was being overturned because new facts were being discovered because of the podcast, plus true crime is probably the number one category out there. I'm not a true crime fan because I like to sleep at night, but it's very, very popular out there. Then it started to dip a little again. And then I think there was another resurgence around 2016. I got my start in 2010 with Gary Vaynerchuk. Gary and I met in late 2010, and I had started my first company, Social Buzz TV, which was an online media outlet. And I wrote my first book, became a speaker, I was a live on-air host and personality. And I did that for about 6 years and went through a deep transformational process on myself. Learned how to love myself, learned how to really unfuck everything I'd created for 35 years and also become fully accountable for my life. And when I came out of that for the latter part of 2016, I focused on, unintentionally. I met a girl on a dating app. She told me about the course. She signed me up. She got me through the doors. She broke up with me in the middle of it. And on the other side of it I learned how to love myself and become fully accountable for my life, past, present, and future. Once that took place, I was like, okay, well, it's time to get back to work. Great. Well, I fucking hate what I do. Okay. I don't like creating content for your Facebook page or helping you create a social media strategy. I don't care about any of that. In fact, it creates resentment more than anything. So I need to find a way out of here. But time out. I had built a footprint and a personal brand for the past 6 years that I didn't want to just abandon. So the $1 million question was, how do you leave the digital marketing space, but still stay in it? So as I stayed curious, I went and rented a desk at a co-working place around the corner from my house. And I ran into an old friend, and she had an internet radio show at the time in that co-working space. And I was like, what the hell's that? She's like, well, we broadcast it once a week and it goes here and it goes there. And I go, is it working? And she's like, well, and I'm like, yeah, I'm not convinced. So, you could just start a podcast. And I had a podcast already. I had rebranded it 3 times, but that was my ticket early on to meeting guys like Gary Vee and Damon John and guys that were really doing it early on that I knew were going places and then I wanted to align myself with. So that was always my play was, hey man, let's get you on the show. And when I told this individual that there's a better way than an internet radio show, she said, well, I don't know how to start a podcast. Maybe you could create a solution to help people start podcasts. Insert antennas going up. So I walked her down to her car, went back up to my rented co-working desk, and I mapped out what would become the Podcast Launch Lab, which is a turnkey podcast launch solution to take you from idea to iTunes in 90 days or less with our proven podcast launch solution. In addition to that, you'll go into our 12-month incubator after we launch, and we'll support you with ongoing production, content, coaching, and keep you in the game. Because a lot of people start podcasts, not a lot of people continue podcasts. And all my clients for the past decade that are absolutely crushing it, have grown their business, grown their communication skills, increased their content game, doubled down on going pro because of the podcast. All of them have one thing in common, and that's just sticking with it and consistency. And that's why our program is a 15-month program. It's 90 days to launch and then a minimum of 12-month incubator, because I'm going to hold your feet to the fire and I'm going to hold you accountable and I'm going to ride you like Zorro to make sure you do what you said you're going to do, because you'll thank me at a later date because of it. Why? Because I'm living proof. So when I give talks and I say podcasting will radically change your life and your business, why am I qualified to say that? Because I'm living proof. I'm living proof. And now I empower and enable other people through the work that I get to do and the platform that I've been blessed to create. I enable other people to go and do it. So it's become my life's work. It's become something that it doesn't feel like work. I travel the world and, I do comedy and keynotes and help people launch podcasts. And if it's not those 3 things, I just don't leave the house.
Sounds like you found your why.
Yeah, man. Absolutely.
What is considered consistent and why do people stop being consistent?
Because it's shoulda, coulda, woulda. I got, this, that, excuses.
What do you consider consistent? And I guess I should have been more specific with the question. Is it once a week? Is it every other day? Is it once a month?
Yeah, once a week. And do a bulk recording schedule. Record a couple times a month. Block out 2 or 3 hours, bang out 2 to 4 episodes, and be done with the podcast for the month. That way it's not, it's Monday, time to record another podcast. That's not sustainable. Biggest mistake people make when starting a podcast, number 1, trying to do all the work themselves. I'm going to record the episode, edit the episode, post the episode, create the clips, do this, AI tool that. You'll never go anywhere at all. Very rarely have I seen somebody start a podcast on their own, do all the work, and make it sustainable.
So you mentioned a bunch of stuff there about all the stuff that needs to be done in order to get that podcast going. So what is the roadmap? What is the roadmap to have truly, besides obviously being consistent, what is the roadmap to launch that podcast and to really have it and get it going for that long? Because I know that there's a lot that goes into it.
Yeah, I mean, there's significant amount, and to go into all the details on what it takes to start a podcast. I mean, first and foremost, figuring out why you're starting a podcast is the most important part. Then creating the branding, which is your cover art, your intro, your outro, your promo trailer, your first 2 episodes. Getting those dialed in is the most core. Those are probably to summarize the core components to launching your podcast. And then after that, making sure you're recording at least 4 episodes a month and extracting micro content for between 3 and 5 clips per episode from each episode that you're recording. So you've got content to post on socials. To number 1, to promote the show. Number 2, have content to post. Number 3, edify yourself, your guest, whatever else you're talking about on the podcast.
Right, right. You know what I like about what you're talking about too is that everything that you're saying is obviously towards being and having a successful podcast, but it's really, you could use everything that you're saying towards successful marketing by being consistent and having the why and having the proper branding. Just by creating a podcast, you could basically create an entire marketing strategy on really getting the word out for what your business does and what you do and how you can help.
Yeah, I say starting a podcast will solve a majority of all of your content problems and social media problems specifically. But it's the ultimate networking tool. That's what I teach. Start a podcast so you can interview people you want to sell stuff to. Secondly, get your content game consistent because of the podcast. Number 3, become a better communicator because of the podcast.
What do you mean a networking tool? Because if I'm a B2C, why would I want to interview customers? I mean, I could see it being a good networking tool with referral partners and stuff like that, if that's what you were getting at.
Well, yeah, if you're B2C, then you're looking for referral partners for sure.
Right. And then you can interview all your referral partners. And everybody says yes to a podcast. Most
Correct.
people.
Yeah, because we all have egos. And we like them stroked.
Yep, exactly. That's pretty awesome.
That's why I'm here today.
I gotcha. You just want your ego stroked.
I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you look amazing.
Keep going.
Okay. Love your glasses. I love the background too. Gotta have a little Charlie Chaplin in there.
Yeah, you do. Absolutely. It's I just built, this is my 5th studio. So we just got done with the 5th studio, and I got a little knack for these things. So I'm kind of excited.
Where are you located, Sebastian?
I'm in Miami, Florida.
You are? I didn't know. I'm born and raised.
Really?
Yes.
No kidding.
Till I was 35. I moved out here to Tampa after I turned around 35, 36 years old.
Where'd you go to high school?
Christopher Columbus.
Oh, yeah, Columbus guy.
Are you born and raised?
Not born. I was born in Indiana, but 7th grade on. But I claim Miami. I don't claim Indiana.
Where'd you go to high school?
Killian.
Get out of here. What year did you graduate?
Yeah, 97.
97. I just think it's funny. Wow. Like literally, just for those who are still listening, quite frankly, it's funny because I just reached out to you, Sebastian, because you're part of the Martell coaching program that I'm a part of, which by the way is fantastic.
Martell Mafia. Yeah, we've got, that's been, Dan hit me up at a very unique time last year, which was right before the election where no one was buying anything. We had a little bit of a sales drought for a couple of months. And naturally, as a business owner, as healthy as the company is, you still mildly panic, So I'm already part of a mastermind group that I have been for the past 4 years based out of Dallas called Apex. And I'm very loyal when it comes to masterminds because I can't really focus on more than one. But we had Dan come into our public event last year, $1 Million Mastermind in Dallas. I missed his talk because I went and took a nap because I was tired. And I'm like, I don't know who this Dan guy is. So I went and took a nap and I missed it. But I kept hearing Dan, like everywhere I go. And when that starts to happen, you're like, this guy must be the real deal. And of course, his book was all the rage. Well, I follow him in like November and he slides into the DMs like only he can do. And he starts chatting me up. And the next day, I go down to the grocery store downstairs to my house. I live here in the Gables, right by Merrick Park.
Okay.
And and I walk into Milam's, and standing in the wine aisle is my buddy Brady Lowe, who I used to do his foodie events here in Miami. He used to host these events all over the country, but Miami was one of the cities. It was called Cachon 555, and it was 5 chefs, 5 pigs, and 5 wines locally sourced for an entire weekend foodie event. And I would go and I'd cover it and was part of media, et cetera. And we just developed a cool relationship through that. Now, I had not seen Brady in years. So I was like, Brady? He's like, Sebastian? I was like, dude, what's up? Now, Brady lives in Atlanta, okay? Mind you, he's there with clients, owns a hospitality coaching brand. And he's there with clients because they own a wine brand. That's why I saw him in Milam's, and he was there for the weekend. So he's like, we're catching up. And he's like, hey, we should talk. I'm in Dan Martell's group. I'm like, I'm sorry, come again? Now, Dan had just hit me up the day before, and I'm like, Dan, I'm not joining the group. I'm not doing it. I'm panicking silently. And Dan was like, well, panicking is not going to help. And resistance is highest when it's time to level up. So do you want coaching or not? So
he hit that pain button, boy. He really leaned into that pain.
Yeah, well, I running into Brady was like, okay, I'm a man of faith. So I was like, there's no mistakes here. I was like, hold on a second, this is a total God thing. Because Martell hit me up. Then I ran into Brady. Brady's in the group. Brady's like, yeah, dude, it's like $8 or $9 grand a year. Totally worth it. We meet once a week. It's all online. So I started hitting him up again. I was like, hey, man, I ran into Brady. He's like, yeah, Brady's a good dude. This, that, and the other. Well, Apex is a pretty gigantic network as well. And we run in a lot of the same rooms. And Ryan Stewman, who started Apex, is a huge Martell fan. So me being one of the leaders within Apex, like saying I joined Martell's group, while in another group, it was like, yeah, which is amazing. Like, hold on a second. Because normally it's like, hey, which pond are you fishing in, pal? So I asked around that weekend and was like, hey, I'm thinking about joining. Everyone was like, do it. My buddy Chris Killy's in the group. We're in Apex together. And he was like, this is the best coaching I've ever had my entire life. So I joined for 2 months. And then like 2 weeks later, my XRP crypto went through the roof. So I just paid for the rest of the year. And of course, it's like, what, $9,000 for the year. And I think we have signed like 5 clients to the agency. So not only have I probably 6x'd that investment in 3 months just by being in the right room. But yeah, Dan's coaching is nuts, dude.
We hit our mastermind goal. We call it a mastermind. It's the same thing though. We use his formula on the group coaching that we do. And yeah, the goal was to hit 10. I had just started. I had 1 member, and the goal was to have just 10 by the end of the year. And I signed up around the same time you did, like around October or November. And I wanted 10 by the end of the year, and we ended up with 13 by the end of the year.
Nice.
And we're still going. The goal, I would like to get 100 by the end of the year. It's not going as smoothly as I wanted it to, because those opens are tough. It's hard to get all those opens out there and start those conversations. Yeah. But I did just bring on a salesperson literally just today. So I'm pretty excited. He's going to help me with the opens, and I'm going to go through the whole sales strategy and the rocket method and all that stuff. So I'm pretty excited about that. But
yeah, no, I haven't had much luck with sell by chat. I have had a lot of luck with showing up in the group, providing value, making connections, inviting people to be on my podcast, and then of course bringing comedy to our weekly calls. That's probably the biggest sales tip that I have is, cracking Dan up and then infusing the community with comedy, because who doesn't like to laugh, right?
No, for sure. I definitely have to be a little bit more involved in the group, but I'm going to definitely share this with them. That's for sure. One of the things that I regret most when people ask me the question, what's your biggest regret in business, is not hiring a coach until probably 10 years after my entrepreneur journey.
Yeah, same.
Same.
I
mean, I was just out here just doing whatever the hell I knew how to do. And, you just stay. You have this stagnant growth that doesn't really go anywhere. And it goes a little bit here and there. But it's also what I really like about Dan, and what really just sort of changes it up for me, because I was part of Strategic Coach for over 2 years with Dan Sullivan. And that was pretty good. But it was a little bit too kumbaya for me. It was a little bit too enjoy your life. And it's sort of the buyback principle, but it's more just like, I don't know. It's not like Dan, where he's just very much in your face and he's just like, get the fuck after it. Let's go.
Yeah, I like it. Hey, side note, Mike Miranda just hit me back and said, yeah, I know who Vince is. I've done a couple of his courses. Very knowledgeable dude. I think he's in BNI as well.
So is this a 1-to-1?
This is a 1-to-1 for sure.
All right.
He's like, when are you on his show? I'm like, right now.
That's awesome. Okay, so I'd like to know a little bit about your own podcast, and I'd like to know, if you don't mind, I'd like to pick your brain a little bit here live on the show. Well, not live, recorded, on the whole book journey and writing a book. Like, that's something I've always thought about. I've put together this workbook here and stuff like that, but it's not like a book. You're talking about a book that you sold on Amazon and stuff like that, or just a book that you had written that you were just selling yourself out of the back of your truck?
No, so the first one I did with a publisher, and then the second one I did on my own. I did it with a company called Self Publishing School. My buddy Chandler Bolt owns a company in Austin, Texas, phenomenal company called Self Publishing School, and they have a course. They now have a done for you, but at the time it was a done with you. So I had a coach and a course and a program and community, and they told you everything you need to do to go and actually make the book a reality. That was a lot of work, but we still got it done. It wasn't overwhelming by any stretch of the imagination. I think the writing the book is the hardest part. The first one I did was with Advantage Forbes Media, that's based in Charleston. And that was early on in my career when I was flat broke. I actually bartered that deal. It cost me $25,000 to write the book. And I launched their social media strategy. And in exchange, I wrote my book, Social Media Sucks if you don't know what you're doing. And I did that in 2013. And then a follow-up would be the podcast book I wrote in 2020 with Self-Publishing School. But, being able to, I was able to figure out my own formula for writing the book, which was, all right, let's come up with a table of contents, how many chapters we got. And then after the table of contents, let's put 4 bullet points under each chapter. And then under each bullet point, let's put a paragraph. And now we've gone from a table of contents to an outline. So then I would take chapter 1, 4 bullet points, the 4 paragraphs, and then just start expanding on it. Yeah. These days with ChatGPT, there's a lot of hacks and cheating that people can do. I think that, if you are writing a book, you are actually writing it. If you ghostwrite a book, you didn't write the fucking book, someone else did. So I'm proud to say that I wrote all of my books. The first book I got interviewed. So it was kind of a ghostwriting situation, but I still got interviewed for like 10 hours. So that interview then got transcribed, and the transcription then got formatted and turned into a book.
Now that's awesome.
Yeah. So that, that was a way to do it. And then for Podcasts Suck, I was having trouble I decided that I didn't want like a glorified pamphlet. There's a lot of shitty books out there. I was like, what is this? And, the self-publishing world is kind of well, these days it's not, because it's become more of the norm, but it used to be, a little bit of like, tongue in cheek for the traditional publishing world. But especially like people have handed me some books and I'm like, yikes, I can't even believe you give this to people. So it was important to me to make sure we had at least 40,000 words. 40,000 words. It looks like an actual book, not like too big, not too tiny. I wanted the cover to be an extension of my brand and what I was doing. And I wanted to be a sales tool. So I think one chapter breaks down my entire process on how to launch. The rest of it is about mindset, commitment, getting in the right headspace, doing what you need to do, everything that goes into starting a podcast. Then we touch on marketing, et cetera. And then I ended up doing so the 40,000 words was a bit of a challenge for me, because I broke it down and I was like, all right, cool. We got 12 chapters and it's 40,000 words. That is 3,300 words per chapter. So my goal every day or every week is to write 3,400 words, because every time I write 3,400 words, I've got another chapter. So I think we got to like, I don't know, chapter 8 or 9, and I was still lagging. I still got 3 or 4 chapters to go. So I was like, all right, we're getting this shit done. So I drove up to Cocoa Beach. I locked myself into a hotel room, the Best Western at the Cocoa Beach Pier, in an oceanfront room. I rearranged all of the furniture, put the desk in front of the window, and I made a deal with myself. I'm like, I'm going to write from 7 in the morning until noon, and then I'm going to go sit in the sand and drink beer the rest of the day. I did that for 4 days straight. And finally got it done. The mistake that I made was that I did Google Docs voice to text, and I didn't go back through and make sure it didn't look like gibberish. So it was an editing nightmare when I think I ended up going through 3 different editors when it was all said. And that's important to have several editors anyway, not just one, because, different set of eyeballs see different things, but finally got it done when that case. So my team did the artwork. So that was easy. And then formatting is important. So once you write it, then it needs to be edited. You've got to go through 3 to 5 editing rounds. There you go. Exactly. At least 3, because the first one you're going to go through, then you read it, make sure. I've never read my book so many times in my life. My goodness. So you go through 3 editing rounds, then it needs to be proofed, then it needs to be formatted. And then once it's formatted, you bring it all together, and then you go to KDP, which is Amazon's publishing platform. And then they show you everything that needs to get done in order for the final formatted PDF to be uploaded, and the cover, etc. You order some author copies, and then you're off to the races. Now it's print on demand. So if I have an event coming up or I'm speaking somewhere and the client wants to, as part of our deal, I'll say, hey, listen, instead of charging you, 15 grand for the talk, I'll do it for 10 grand and you guys buy 300 books. I just go to Amazon. I buy 300 copies for $200. I think shipped out the door is like $7 per copy, and it's done. And it becomes a little bit of a moneymaker, not much, but if I'm discounting my speaker fee, then it is, it's kind of offset a little bit I just love the ease of use of it. And I can get them shipped. They usually show up within, a couple of weeks. So this whole print on demand is great. So yeah, it's a process. But it's a book is your new business card, and it's definitely an edification tool. For sure. Because if they're looking at a speaker to book who's written a book or hasn't written a book, I'm getting the gig every time.
Definitely credibility.
Yeah.
For sure.
For
in
sure.
your industry. If I were to start a podcast today, what can I expect? Like in regards to how long is it going to take me to get results? I know we said once a week we got to post something. But, I think what people probably are concerned most with is just nobody watching. No views, nobody sharing, nobody's doing anything. What do you tell people that are maybe, I don't know, 3 months in or 6 months in or a year in, and they're just still not seeing the results, and they're just like, what the hell? Nobody's watching. What's the point of me doing this? So on and so forth.
Yeah, I say, fuck the numbers and vanity metrics and downloads and who's listening and who's watching. It doesn't fucking matter. The only thing that matters is, are you consistent? And are you building relationships with your podcast that are helping you grow your business and grow your network? And is the podcast allowing you to repurpose content so that you are showing up where the eyeballs are at 100% at now in 2025, which is in the news feed? And who are you becoming because you decided to start a podcast? Because if you get 1 million downloads and no one's buying your stuff, 1 million downloads don't matter. Just a bunch of vanity metrics. If you're not repurposing content from your podcast and showing up in the newsfeed every day, then your competition is, you're leaving money on the table. And then lastly, like I open up all of my talks with the same question and I close it with the same question. And that is, who's missing out because you're not showing up? So the more you talk about what you could be doing or should be doing or used to do, or I'm going to restart it, or we're going to do it in Q2 or Q3 or Q4 when money's not funny anymore, or cows no longer moo, and just push all the bullshit excuses aside and just get started. Start with what you have, where you're at, with what you've got, and find out if you even like what you're doing before you get into this whole world of like, well, nobody's going to watch or listen. If you're utilizing and leveraging a podcast the right way, it doesn't matter if 50 people are watching. It doesn't matter if 50,000 people are listening. If it's growing your business, that's the only thing that matters. If you're growing as a communicator and as a human being because of the podcast, that's really the core important part.
Tell me about your book, Social Media Sucks, and why it doesn't suck if you do it right.
Yeah, I wrote that back, 13 years now, because I got the opportunity to do it. Number one. Number two, I was preaching a message that was falling on deaf ears to most people. Your brand needs social media.
It's amazing, right? Like, it's just so important. And I tell people all the time.
Everybody woke up. Everybody woke up in 2020. It was like New York and California were like, we can move to Miami. It's a nice place to live. I don't know where the fuck they've been. And then podcast, everyone's like, build a brand, go pro, go. You know how long the Gary V and myself have been, I learned because I met him early on before he was a worldwide phenomenon about building a personal brand. One of the first things he taught me was that your personal brand in perpetuity is your reputation. And I never forgot that.
Well, I like what Dan said the other day was no matter what happens with AI and how much they take over and whose jobs they take over, if you could build a personal brand, it ain't going to take over your personal brand. Yes, there's going to be AI influencers and stuff like that, but still building this is your core and will ultimately be your lasting impact in business from now until forever. You'll always be at the very least semi-successful in business if you have a very successful personal brand on social media.
Yeah. I just don't know what took people so long. Social media's been around for 25 years now. People are like, well, maybe I'll start building a personal brand now.
It's funny you mentioned Gary Vee because it was definitely, I'll never forget. I was on a flight to Colorado, not sure if I wanted to be a public adjuster anymore. And I was actually going to Colorado with my mentor at the time because he started a weed growing, marijuana growing, commercial growing business. I was thinking about getting
the good old hippie lettuce.
I was thinking about actually getting into it, so that's why I was traveling over there just to see what it was like. And I downloaded Gary Vee's Crushing It on the way there, and I literally crushed that book on the way to Colorado. And at the time, I wasn't sure if I wanted to continue public adjusting, but what I did know is that at the time I had a travel channel, Make It Work and Travel, on YouTube with my wife because we did a lot of traveling. Traveled 3 months across Asia, went to Africa, did Europe, been to 6 out of the 7 continents, and I had all this video content. We were coming out with a weekly show, and I wasn't sure. I was like, this is what I want to do. I like the YouTube channel. This is really fun. How can I actually make money doing it? And I was thinking about how can I provide value in my YouTube channel that's not just traveling? So I was thinking of being a travel guide or selling photography and stuff like that. And then in my head, I'm like, wait, what am I doing? I've had this travel channel for 3 months. I know a little bit about composition and lighting and editing and photographing and so on and so forth, but not enough to actually teach somebody. I've been a public adjuster for 10 years. Let me just talk about that. And then I just went all in on the whole social media. And again, I read that book. He kept talking about giving it away, give it away for free. There are no secrets. Just give it away. You will be the go-to guy. You will be the person that people go to when they're looking for information. Even if you give them all the information, there's always going to be something else that they need to know, and they will pay you to extract that information whenever they can. And then that's when I started the YouTube channel, and I made sure that I did it once a week, so I had time to edit it. But I also made sure I did it all in one take, so I didn't have to edit it, and all I had to do was add titles because I was editing the travel vlog, which is like scene after scene after scene after scene. I hated the editing process. I loved the result. not the actual process. So when I created the commercial claim show on YouTube, I was like, you know what? I'm going to just tell people it's raw and authentic, but it's really just because I don't want to edit it. And I'm just going to add some titles. And little by little, what's funny about social media that what really caught my attention, I'd say about a couple of months in, I start getting hit up on Instagram. I start getting comments on my videos. And back in the day when I feel like sort of, social media first started, which is like AOL, Instant Messenger, and chat rooms and all that stuff back then, like you didn't know who you were talking to. Your parents would tell you, hey, be careful. It could be some like, slime ball down the street. You never know who it is. But like I realized that it was real people. My first thought went to, is this a real person? Is it just spam? Is it a bot? Like, what is this? But because everyone now has social media, your grandmother included, you're actually getting comments from real people who are actually following you. And because we have the internet that's just so global and you could literally do business anywhere and you could have an entire coaching program that's completely virtual online from Canada to Miami to fucking Russia, that it's like, it's pretty amazing that these comments that I was getting, I'm like, what? These are real people. And you don't have to just only connect with your local, with locally. You could ultimately connect with just everyone around the world. And like you said, there's so many benefits that come out of it. Just not what I noticed when people ask me, does it really work? I just would tell them, I'm not sure. I just know my bank account continues to go up. It's hard to quantify. Yeah. Have you ever noticed that it's kind of hard to quantify, or is that just me? Because I haven't actually tried to quantify it. Like I just know that the revenue goes up, my bank account goes up, it gets better, and I become more, I guess, sort of well known, and people actually want to come work for me. Recruitment is a great thing. That's a huge one when it comes to the social media platform. But it's just always been for me, like unless I'm running ads or something, or I have a particular workbook that I'm selling or a particular course, it's kind of hard for me to actually quantify the impact that having a social media presence has.
Yeah, for sure. You said even my grandma's on social media. Actually, my grandma's dead, Vince.
I knew that.
Both of my grandmas are dead. So
that was the point.
Can we just moment of silence? She's been dead 10 years. It's all good.
And she still has social media. I wouldn't be surprised if she has a fucking Facebook profile.
Yeah, dude, it's become the norm, and this stuff's not slowing down. I think it's AI is going to come along, and it already has, and complement it, make it bigger, badder, and better. So yeah, good times.
Sebastian, I'm really thank you for coming on. I do apologize for the technical difficulties I had in the beginning.
Yeah, what a fucking disaster. Good Lord.
I know, but that's all right. We got it. I took I kept it with the weekly show, but I took a little bit hiatus with the podcast guests and stuff like that. I mean, fuck, man. Like Dan came into my life like, dude, 2024 fucking sucked. I mean, I was fucking, I was 2 days, I was literally a week away from bankruptcy. It fucking sucked.
Turn it around. Turn it around, baby.
I told myself I wouldn't get any coaching, but he fucking, slid into the DMs and fucking hit me in the face with what he was fucking telling me. And I was like, you know what? Fuck it. Let's go. And it was the best thing that ever happened to me. So,
hey, listen, you can't argue with ripped, rich, and rare. And that is what Dan Martell is.
Ripped, rich, and rare. That's good. I like that.
Yeah. I'm definitely counting this as a 1-to-1. I'll connect you with Mike Miranda too.
Yeah, but how about you not do that during the fucking podcast?
Well, I was going to, but you were talking.
I know you were. Tell me about how can people find you, Sebastian? How can you help? And what can people do to really take their games? Just let's close this off with a fucking banger. Drop the mic. Like, what is it about you? And how can you help? And how can you help people just take it to the next level?
Yeah, so if you've been thinking about starting a podcast, somebody's told you to start a podcast, you got that nudge idea, you saw a sign, whatever it may be, that's reason enough to give it a closer look and to take some action on it. Because I can guarantee you one thing, someone is missing out because you're not showing up in the area that you know you should be showing up in. Maybe it's a podcast. I firmly believe that starting a podcast will radically change your life and your business if you let it. But I'm not here to sell you on that idea. You need to sell yourself on that idea. I'm here to facilitate a structured game plan to enable you and empower you. Give you the keys, give you the car, give you the keys. I even start the fucking thing for you. You got to jump in and drive. So if that's something you've been looking to entertain, I'd be happy to chat with you. Hit me up on Instagram, Podcast Suck. That's podcast plural with 2 S's, or under Sebastian Rusk on Facebook or over on LinkedIn. All the links are in my bio to schedule a call with myself or somebody on my team to chat about what's possible with turning you into a podcast machine. But just know there's a clock ticking that none of us can see. So the time is right now. And remember, someone is missing out because you're not showing up. So I hope I get so far inside your head that it moves you to action, because that's the goal.
Sebastian Rusk, thank you for coming on. You are the owner, CEO of the Podcast Launch Lab, where you could really help entrepreneurs take their podcasting game and their whole, obviously, digital marketing game to the next level. You are the host of the Beyond the Story podcast, and you've got a hell of a book, Podcasts Suck, which means that they don't really suck.
That's right. That's right.
Get the joke.
And a podcast. Right. The other podcast is Podcast Suck as well. So if you go to podcastsuck.com, you'll find the show, and that's a podcast about starting a podcast.
I love it. I love it. Sebastian, thanks, man.
My pleasure. Thanks again, Vince.